I had been looking forward to this family vacation for years. Hawaii was always my dream destination. The beaches, the sunsets, the peaceful sound of the waves. I worked hard, saved every penny, and finally, I managed to set aside $20,000 to take my whole family on the trip of a lifetime. I was so excited. I imagined walking along the shore with my grandchildren, tasting the local food, and watching the hula dancers under the stars. It was supposed to be a memory we would all treasure forever. But at the airport, something happened that I will never forget. As we checked in, my son pulled me aside. He wouldn't look me in the eyes. His voice was cold when he said, "Dad, I forgot to buy you a ticket. Just go home." At first, I thought it was a bad joke. I laughed nervously and said, "Come on, son, stop joking around. Where's my boarding pass?" But he didn't laugh. Instead, he turned away and joined the rest of the family, who avoided looking at me. My heart sank. It was then I realized they had planned this from the very beginning. They used my money, my savings, my sacrifice, but never intended for me to come along. They wanted to enjoy Hawaii without me. I stood there at the airport, watching them walk through security, their backs turned, not a single goodbye. For a long time, I just stood frozen, my suitcase in hand, my chest heavy with disappointment. People around me were rushing to their flights, but my world had stopped. I whispered to myself, why? After everything I did for them, why would they do this? I went back home alone, my house silent. Every corner reminded me of my late wife, who had always believed family was everything. That night, I sat in my living room, replaying the moment again and again. The betrayal cut deep. But life has a way of surprising us when we least expect it. The days after they left were some of the hardest in my life. I had never felt so unwanted, so invisible. I kept asking myself, was I really just a wallet to them? Did my love mean nothing? For the first week, I barely ate. I wandered around the house, staring at the family photos on the walls. Each picture felt like a cruel reminder of how things used to be, back when I thought we were close. One evening, while sitting on the porch, I saw my neighbor, Mr. Reynolds. He was a kind man in his 60s, always neatly dressed in a suit, no matter the weather. He had noticed the sadness in my face. "Evening, George," he said gently. "You look troubled. Care to talk?" At first, I shook my head, not wanting to burden anyone, but something in his voice made me open up. Slowly, I told him everything about the vacation, the money, the betrayal at the airport. He listened quietly, nodding, his eyes calm but sharp. When I finished, he leaned forward and said, "George, I know this must hurt deeply, but sometimes life takes away what we think we need, only to give us what we truly deserve." I didn't quite understand what he meant. Over the next 2 weeks, Mr. Reynolds began visiting me almost every day. We had long conversations about life, about family, about what it means to be respected. He told me stories of his younger days, how he built his business from nothing, how he lost friends to greed, how he learned to tell who truly valued him. Something about his words gave me strength. For the first time, I didn't feel completely alone. On the day my family was set to return from Hawaii, Mr. Reynolds came over in his usual suit. He smiled and said, "Let me accompany you to the airport today." I was surprised, but I agreed. We drove together, and when my family finally walked through the arrival gate, laughing and carrying souvenirs, their faces changed instantly. They froze. Their eyes widened as they saw me standing there, not broken, not weak, but with a confident man in a suit beside me, because that man was not just a neighbor. He was someone who would change everything.
My family stood frozen in the middle of the airport. Their laughter died instantly when they saw me. For a moment, nobody said a word. My son's wife clutched his arm tightly, her face pale. The children, innocent as they were, ran toward me shouting, "Grandpa!" and hugged my legs. My son cleared his throat and tried to speak casually. "Dad, you're here? I thought you stayed home." I looked at him calmly, then turned slightly to the man beside me. "This is Mr. Reynolds," I said. "He wanted to come with me today." Mr. Reynolds shook my son's hand firmly, his eyes never leaving his. There was something powerful in his presence. He wasn't just some friendly neighbor. He carried himself like a man who was used to making important decisions, a man who commanded respect. My son forced a smile, but I could see the nervousness in his eyes. "Nice to meet you, sir," he muttered. Mr. Reynolds smiled politely, but then said something that changed everything. "Actually, we've met before, though you didn't know it. Years ago, when I was building my company, your father helped me in ways I will never forget. He believed in me when nobody else did. I owe much of my success to him." My son blinked, confused. "Wait, your company?" Mr. Reynolds nodded. "Yes, I built a financial firm. I don't usually share personal details, but let's just say today I manage investments worth hundreds of millions of dollars. And when I heard what your father went through, I knew it was time I gave something back." Gasps escaped from a few people nearby who overheard. My family's faces turned pale. I stood there quietly, letting his words sink in. For years, I had never told my children much about my past, about the sacrifices I made, about the people I had quietly helped. They only saw me as the man who paid the bills, who worked hard, who gave without asking for much. They never imagined I had once been the kind of man others respected deeply. Mr. Reynolds placed a hand on my shoulder and continued, "George is not just some old man you can ignore. He is a man of integrity, generosity, and wisdom, and I consider him my mentor." My son's mouth opened, but no words came out. His wife lowered her head in shame. Even the children looked confused, sensing the tension. I finally spoke. My voice was steady, but firm. "You left me behind, thinking I was weak, unimportant. But life has a way of revealing the truth. You see me only as someone to use, but others, they see me for who I really am." The silence that followed was heavy. For the first time, my son couldn't hide behind excuses. And in that moment, I realized something. I didn't need their validation anymore. I had already found respect in myself and in the unexpected friend standing beside me. But this story wasn't over yet, because what Mr. Reynolds did next would change the future of my family forever.
The tension in the airport was so thick that even strangers who were just passing by stopped for a moment, sensing something important was happening. My son shifted uncomfortably, his face red with embarrassment. My daughter-in-law looked down, unable to meet my eyes. Mr. Reynolds took a deep breath and spoke with calm authority. "George, I know you didn't expect this, but I believe it's time your family understands the kind of man you are. Too often, people take kindness for weakness, but kindness, when it comes from the right heart, is a strength greater than any wealth." He reached into his briefcase and pulled out an envelope. My son's eyes followed it nervously, almost greedily, as though it thought it contained money. But instead, Mr. Reynolds handed it to me. "George," he said, "I've prepared legal documents. I want you to join my board of advisors. It's not just a title. You'll receive full respect influence in company decisions, and a very generous monthly stipend. More importantly, I want you by my side, not because of what you can give me, but because of who you are. I stared at him, overwhelmed. But, Reynolds, I'm just a retired man. I'm not sure. He interrupted with a warm smile. You are far more than that. You guided me in my darkest hours. And now, I want the world and your family to see that you are still a man of value, a man whose wisdom deserves recognition. My son's mouth fell open. Dad, I didn't know. His voice cracked, and for the first time in years, I saw guilt in his eyes. I turned to him slowly. You didn't want to know, I replied softly. You only saw me as someone to fund your comfort. You forgot I am more than a bank account. I am your father. Tears filled my daughter-in-law's eyes. She whispered, We were wrong. We thought only of ourselves. We never imagined. The children, too young to understand the full weight of the moment, clung to my hands and said, We love you, Grandpa. Don't be sad. Hearing their little voices softened my heart, but the pain of betrayal was still there. Mr. Reynolds turned to my son and his wife. His tone grew firmer. Do you see now? This man you neglected, the same man you abandoned at the airport, is a man of honor. If you cannot respect him, then you do not deserve him. The silence that followed was heavy, but something shifted in that moment. My son lowered his head, ashamed. My daughter-in-law wiped her tears. For the first time, the power in our relationship no longer belonged to them, it belonged to me. And yet, Mr. Reynolds wasn't finished. He had one more surprise that would leave everyone speechless.
Mr. Reynolds' words echoed through the airport like a gavel striking in a courtroom. People nearby pretended not to listen, but their curious glances betrayed them. My family looked smaller than I had ever seen them before, stripped of their pride, their arrogance, their selfish laughter. I felt a strange calm inside me. For the first time, I wasn't chasing their approval. I wasn't begging for their love. Instead, they were the ones standing in silence, waiting for me to speak. Before I could say anything, Mr. Reynolds stepped forward again. George, he said, do you remember years ago when you loaned me $500 without asking for anything in return? Back then, you told me, don't pay me back with money. Pay me back by being kind to someone else one day. I never forgot those words. I nodded slowly. Yes, I remembered. It had been so long ago. Just a simple act of kindness. Well, Mr. Reynolds continued, his voice firm but emotional. Today is that day. I am paying you back not with kindness alone, but with honor. He turned toward my son and his wife. Your father doesn't need you for money or trips or company. He has everything he needs inside himself. But let me be clear, if you ever again treat him like a burden, you will regret it. Because from today forward, he is not just your father. He is also my partner. Gasps filled the air. My son's jaw dropped. My daughter-in-law whispered under her breath, Partner? Mr. Reynolds smiled. Yes, I've already drafted the papers. George will co-own a portion of my company. He will receive dividends, shares, and full rights as an advisor. This isn't charity. This is recognition of what he deserves. I stood frozen, unable to speak. The weight of his words hit me like a wave. Co-owner? Shares? Recognition? I had never asked for such things. All I ever wanted was respect from my family. And yet here I was, being honored in a way I never thought possible. My son finally spoke, his voice shaking. "Dad, I don't know what to say. I'm so sorry. We were wrong. We should never have treated you like that. Please, forgive me." Tears welled in my eyes, but I didn't answer immediately. Forgiveness is easy to ask for, but not so easy to give, especially when the wound is still fresh. Mr. Reynolds looked at me with a steady gaze, as if telling me silently, "This is your moment. The choice is yours." I took a deep breath. "I will think about forgiveness," I said softly. "But understand this. Trust is not given. It is earned. You will need to prove day by day that you truly value me, not just my money." My son nodded, tears streaming down his face. My daughter-in-law whispered, "We will, Dad. We promise." The children hugged me tighter, sensing that something important was happening, even if they didn't fully understand. But Mr. Reynolds wasn't finished. He smiled knowingly and said, "George, I told you earlier that life sometimes takes away what we think we need to give us what we truly deserve. What you deserve is still waiting." I turned to him puzzled. "What do you mean?" He chuckled softly. "You'll see. I've arranged something very special for you, and soon your family will see it too." My heart began to race. What could he mean?
As we left the airport, the air outside felt heavy with silence. My son and his family walked a few steps behind me, as though they were ashamed to be near. But Mr. Reynolds stayed by my side, his presence calm, steady, reassuring. He leaned closer and said quietly, "George, I didn't want to overwhelm you in front of everyone, but there's something I need to show you. Will you come with me tomorrow morning?" I frowned, puzzled. "Show me what?" He only smiled. "A surprise, one that belongs to you." That night, I barely slept. My mind kept racing. What could he possibly mean? I wasn't a man who cared about riches or luxuries. All I ever wanted was to live in peace, to be loved by my family. And yet, part of me felt like my life was about to change in a way I could never have imagined. The next morning, a sleek black car pulled up in front of my house. The driver stepped out and opened the door. Inside sat Mr. Reynolds, wearing his usual tailored suit, but this time with a sparkle in his eyes. "Ready?" he asked. I nodded slowly, still unsure. We drove for nearly an hour, leaving the city behind, passing through winding roads surrounded by trees and sunlight. Finally, the car slowed as we approached a tall iron gate. It opened silently, revealing a breathtaking property beyond. A large villa stood at the heart of rolling green hills. The house gleamed white against the blue sky, its windows reflecting the morning light. There was a garden filled with flowers, a small lake shimmering nearby, and a stone path leading up to the entrance. I stared in disbelief. What is this place? Mr. Reynolds smiled. "This, George, is yours." I shook my head instantly. No, I can't accept something like this. This is too much." He placed a hand on my shoulder. "Listen to me. Years ago, when I had nothing, you gave me hope. You told me to believe in myself when the world laughed at me. Without you, I wouldn't be who I am today. This house is not charity. It is gratitude." My eyes blurred with tears. I had never owned anything so grand, so peaceful. For decades, I had lived simply, never asking for more. And yet here was a gift so beyond imagination. It felt like a dream. I whispered, "But what about my family? What will they think?" Mr. Reynolds' voice grew firm. "They will see that you cannot be discarded. They will see that respect is earned, not demanded. If they wish to be a part of your life, they must come here, not to take, but to give. This house will be the place where you are honored, not ignored. I walked through the garden, touching the petals of the flowers, feeling the soft grass beneath my shoes. For the first time in years, I felt alive. Not because of the wealth, but because someone had finally reminded me of my worth. As we stood on the balcony overlooking the hills, Mr. Reynolds turned to me and said, "This is only the beginning, George. I told you, what you deserve is still waiting. And soon, the world will know your story." My breath caught in my throat. The world? What did he mean by that?
The days after receiving the villa felt like a dream. Each morning, I woke up to the sound of birds, the sunlight pouring through wide glass windows, and the gentle breeze from the hills. For the first time in decades, I didn't wake up worrying about bills, loneliness, or disappointment. I woke up feeling respected. My son and his wife had come to visit once. They stood awkwardly in the grand living room, their voices low, their heads bowed. My son muttered, "Dad, we still feel ashamed. We don't deserve this kindness." I only told him calmly, "It's not about deserving. It's about change. If you want to be in my life, then change. Show me with actions, not words." He nodded silently, and for the first time, I saw real sincerity in his eyes. But even then, something felt incomplete. I still didn't understand what Mr. Reynolds meant when he said the world would know my story. One afternoon, as I sat on the porch overlooking the garden, Mr. Reynolds arrived with a group of people. They carried cameras, microphones, and notebooks. I stood, confused. "George," Reynolds said with a warm smile, "I told you your story deserves to be heard. These are journalists, filmmakers, and writers. I've asked them to document your life, your struggles, your sacrifices, your kindness, and yes, even your family's betrayal. The world needs to see that true greatness is not measured by wealth, but by heart." I froze, my chest tightening. My story? But I'm just an ordinary man. Reynolds shook his head. "No, you're not. You are proof that even the quietest sacrifices shape lives. People like you are forgotten too easily. I won't allow that. The world will know what a real father, a real human being looks like." The journalists began asking questions. At first I was nervous, stumbling over my words. But slowly the memories came out. Stories of working 2 jobs to put food on the table, of saving every penny to send my son to college, of never buying things for myself so the family could have more. And finally, the story of Hawaii, the moment they left me behind. When I finished, there were tears in the eyes of some of the listeners. One of the journalists whispered, "This isn't just a story. This is a lesson the world needs." Mr. Reynolds put his hand on my shoulder. "Soon, George, people everywhere will know who you are, not because you demanded it, but because you lived it." That evening, I sat in the villa's library staring at the flames in the fireplace. My heart was heavy with memories, but light with a strange new hope. Perhaps my pain wasn't wasted after all. Perhaps my story would remind others to respect the ones who love them most. But even then, Reynolds warned me, "George, once your story is out, there will be more changes, good and bad. Some will admire you, others may envy you. You must be ready." I nodded slowly. My quiet life was about to become something far greater than I ever expected. Within weeks, the first article about my life was published. A national magazine ran the headline, "Father spends life savings on family only to be abandoned, but finds respect in an unexpected place." At first, I didn't believe anyone would care. I thought maybe a handful of people would read it, nod, and move on with their lives. But I was wrong. The story spread like wildfire. Social media exploded with comments. "This man deserves the world's respect. How could his own son treat him like that? Fathers like him are the reason we are who we are today. We must honor them." Television networks began calling Mr. Reynolds. Documentaries were proposed. Soon, a short video about my story went viral, receiving millions of views within days. Everywhere I went, people recognized me. At the market, strangers approached me with tears in their eyes, saying, "Sir, thank you for your sacrifices. You remind me of my own father." Some even hugged me. It was overwhelming. I'd spent years feeling invisible, unimportant, and suddenly the world saw me. But not everyone celebrated. My son and his wife began to feel the weight of shame. Friends, neighbors, even colleagues whispered behind their backs. My son came to me one evening, his voice trembling. "Dad, people hate me. They call me ungrateful. They say I betrayed you. I can't live with this guilt anymore." I looked at him, silent for a long moment. Then I said, "The world may forgive you one day, but forgiveness must start at home. It begins with how you treat me. Not in front of cameras, not to impress others, but here, when no one's watching." Tears rolled down his face. He knelt before me, something I never imagined my son would do, and whispered, "Then teach me, Dad. Teach me how to be better." My heart ached. I had dreamed of this moment for years, but now that it was here, it was bittersweet. I placed a hand on his shoulder and said, "I will teach you. But remember, change is not words, it is action." Meanwhile, Mr. Reynolds had bigger plans. He arranged for me to speak at a public event, an auditorium filled with thousands of young people and families. When I stepped on stage, the lights blinding and the cameras flashing, my knees trembled. But as I looked at the faces in the crowd, I remembered the years of struggle, the nights of sacrifice, and the day at the airport when my own family turned their back on me. I took a deep breath and began to speak. My story is not just about betrayal. It is about love, about giving everything you have, even when nobody notices, and about finding the courage to stand tall when the world pushes you down. The crowd erupted in applause. For the first time, I wasn't just a father abandoned at an airport. I was a voice for fathers everywhere. But success always brings new storms, and soon a storm was heading straight for me and my family.
The applause from that public event still echoed in my mind long after it ended. Messages poured in from across the world, sons promising to treat their fathers better, daughters calling their parents to say thank you, families reunited after years of silence. It felt like my pain had finally found purpose. But fame is a double-edged sword. With recognition comes envy, and with respect comes resentment. A few weeks later, I noticed strange articles online. Headlines twisted the truth. Is this man's story real or a carefully crafted lie? Did he exaggerate his sacrifices to gain sympathy? Neighbors question, was he really abandoned? I felt my stomach drop. It wasn't enough for some people to honor my story, they needed to tear it apart. One evening, as I sat in the villa's library, Mr. Reynolds arrived with a serious look on his face. He set a stack of newspapers on the table. "George," he said, "you've become a symbol, and symbols are always attacked. There are those who want to discredit you because your story threatens them. Not everyone likes the idea of ordinary people becoming extraordinary." I picked up one of the papers. My hands trembled as I read lies written about me. Claims that I had hidden wealth all along, that I manipulated my family to look like villains, that Mr. Reynolds had staged everything for publicity. My heart ached. Why would they say these things? I never asked for any of this. Reynolds placed a firm hand on my shoulder. Because the truth makes people uncomfortable. You are living proof that love matters more than greed, and that terrifies those who live only for power and money. The hardest part wasn't the lies, it was the effect on my family. My son came rushing to me one night, panic in his voice. "Dad, people at work are whispering that I betrayed you just for fame. My boss barely looks at me anymore. My friends don't invite me anywhere.
Even our children hear things at school." I looked into his desperate eyes. For the first time, I realized the storm wasn't just mine, it was theirs too. I sighed deeply. This is the cost of truth, son. You wanted comfort without responsibility. Now the world is reminding us what happens when we forget to honor those who sacrifice for us. He broke down, tears streaming. "Dad, I wish I could go back and change that day at the airport. I wish I could undo it all." I embraced him quietly, my own eyes heavy with sorrow. We can't change the past, but we can choose what we do now. The storm raged louder each day. Journalists digging deeper, critics mocking, people debating whether I was a hero or a fraud. And yet, in the middle of the chaos, I felt a strange kind of strength, because unlike before, I wasn't standing alone anymore. Reynolds was by my side. My grandchildren hugged me every morning. Even my son and his wife, broken by shame, began showing me small acts of genuine care, helping in the garden, cooking meals, listening to my stories. Perhaps the storm wasn't here to destroy me. Perhaps it was here to rebuild my family. But Reynolds warned me, this was only the beginning. And one night, he revealed something that would change everything. Something about my late wife that I had never known.
That night, as the rain tapped gently against the villa's windows, Mr. Reynolds sat across from me with an expression I had never seen before, part sorrow, part relief. "George," he began, his voice low but steady, "there is something I've carried for years, something about your late wife, and I can't keep it from you any longer." My chest tightened. My wife had passed away nearly a decade ago, and though the grief had softened with time, her memory was still tender. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice trembling. He looked me straight in the eyes. "Your wife knew this would happen. Not the exact details, not the vacation, not the airport, but she feared that your family would one day take you for granted, that they would forget the sacrifices you made. She asked me, if that day ever came, to stand by you." My breath caught. You knew her?" He nodded slowly. "We were friends long before you moved here. She came to me once, worried. She said, if George ever finds himself alone, remind him that he is worth more than what others see. Remind him that he deserves respect, not pity. She believed you were stronger than you ever gave yourself credit for." Tears welled in my eyes. My wife's love had reached across years, across death itself, to guide me in my darkest moment. I whispered, "All this time, I thought I was abandoned, but she made sure I wouldn't be." Reynolds placed a hand over mine and said, "Exactly. She planted the seed of resilience in you, and when your son left you at that airport, that seed finally began to grow." I wept openly, not from sorrow, but from a deep, cleansing release. For the first time, I didn't feel like a victim of betrayal. I felt like the continuation of my wife's love, her strength living on inside me. The days that followed were different. My son came to me more often, not out of guilt, but out of genuine care. He brought me coffee in the mornings, asked me about my health, even invited me to spend weekends with his family. His children ran into my arms, their laughter washing away years of silence. One afternoon, he sat beside me on the porch, his face filled with regret. "Dad," he said softly, "I can't erase what I did. Forgetting you at the airport, leaving you behind, it'll haunt me forever. But I want you to know this. I will spend the rest of my life making it right. I don't want my children to grow up thinking that love can be bought with money. I want them to see what real respect looks like." I placed my hand on his shoulder and smiled faintly. "Then start today. Not with grand gestures, not with expensive gifts. Start with presence. Sit with me. Listen. Share. That is all I ever wanted." Months later, the storm of rumors faded. People moved on to other stories, other scandals. But the change inside my home remained. My family began rebuilding, brick by brick, trust by trust. And one evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, I gathered them all in the garden, my son, his wife, my grandchildren. I told them the story of their grandmother's quiet strength, her faith in me, and the man named Reynolds who honored her wish. My granddaughter asked innocently, "Grandpa, what's the most important thing you've learned through all of this?" I looked around at their faces, the same faces that had once turned away from me, now filled with hope. And I said that love without respect is empty, that money cannot replace time, and that sometimes, even when we are forgotten, we are never truly alone, because love leaves traces that guide us back to each other. Reynolds raised his glass of tea and smiled. "Well said, George, well said." The garden filled with laughter. My heart, once heavy with abandonment, now felt light, carried by love, forgiveness, and the memory of a woman who had seen my worth even when the world forgot it. And in that moment, I knew the vacation that had begun with rejection had ended with redemption. Not in Hawaii, not with beaches or luxury, but here, in the quiet of my own home, where love had finally returned.